So there's a lot of weird, trippy Japanese art online, and it's kind of its own genre, which is what I want to talk about here today. But there's something surreal about seeing this very internet kind of art in a real life art gallery, hand painted onto a giant canvas over 9 feet tall. This 2016 piece is called A Day When Many Dreams Come True by Masakatsu Iwamoto, who goes by Mr., and was displayed as part of an exhibition in the Lemon Maupin Art Galleries in New York and Hong Kong. When you first look at this piece, it's honestly hard to know where to even look at. It's overwhelming, like neon colored noise with overly cutesy girls plastered on top. It's a really intense piece, and it isn't overly obvious as to what it even means, but that's because this piece doesn't really exist in a vacuum. Not that any art does, but this one in particular is building on top of some really niche subcultures. If you're not already familiar with Japanese subcultures or this paradox of emotional distress being disguised by cuteness that is at the heart of so many of these subcultures, then this piece might seem like insane nonsense. So I first want to try and detangle this web of influences before trying to unpack some of the meaning behind this painting. Firstly, menhera, literally mental healther, is a subculture that disguises themes of mental illness with cute aesthetics. It started out as vent art on sites like Nichan and gained popularity with Bisuko Ezaki's manga Menhera-chan, about a girl who can transform and fight evil by cutting her wrists. It often contains themes of self-harm and suicide, as well as medical imagery, like bandages, syringes, hospital bracelets, and pills, all with bright pastel colors. For my purposes, it's basically interchangeable with the term yami kawaii, literally sickly cute. The fashion of this subculture can even include applying makeup to make yourself look sickly, such as exaggerating eye bags or making it look like you just got finished crying. This subculture is mostly popular with young women who use it as a way to express stigmatized mental health topics. It's related to jiraikei, literally landmine type fashion. The history and controversy behind jiraikei is outside the scope of this, but I bring it up now because I intend to talk about the ableist fetishization of women with mental health issues later, and the jiraikei subculture is particularly relevant. Other than Menhara-chan, the other three works that I'm almost certain inspired this painting are Poilamagi Madoka Magica. Imagine if Sailor Moon was instead about things like trauma, self-hatred, disillusionment with society, and the emotional labor society forces onto young girls. While certainly not the first, it was one of the main works that popularized anime with a cutesy aesthetic secretly being about dark topics. In spite of this, however, the show is ultimately really hopeful and positive. Next, Serial Experiments Lane. This show explored and predicted the impact of internet culture before the internet was even popular. It explored things like dissociation and expressing suffering as an aesthetic. It's also similar to Mr.'s painting. In the surreal way, it blends themes of mental health with digital culture. And lastly, Welcome to the NHK satirized the self-destructive and often obsessive hikikomori, or socially withdrawn, lifestyle associated with otakus. The protagonist is this delusional hentai-addicted conspiracy nut. To finally get to the painting itself, we see these incredibly childlike and rounded girls juxtaposed in front of a hellish background. Large heads and detailed eyes are hallmarks of anime art, but this piece takes that to the extreme. Look at the central blonde character whose presence utterly dominates the upper half of the canvas. The shapes that make her up are softened and rounded in a way that evokes a nurturing instinct within us. Look at the way her eyes almost look like bubbles, and look at the rounded shoulders in the character below. There's not a single sharp angle to be found anywhere on these characters. These characters seem harmless and vulnerable, like something you need to protect. These are core features that can be seen in a lot of anime art, and is often lumped under the term moe. It's almost like the characters are saying, hey, just look at me and everything will be alright. These characters are depicted in this standardized, reproducible format and are meticulously optimized for broad appeal in an almost cynical manner. They are designed more for the sake of marketability and consumption rather than any kind of profound artistic intent. How can something so cute feel so hollow, so terrifying? On the right-hand side of the painting, we see some text that appears to be a storefront sign. It translates to 24-hour service. To me, this evokes the never-ending onslaught of consumerism. Otakus can be incredibly obsessive in their consumption, as seen with gacha games and virtual YouTubers or idols.
返して僕のスパチャ返してスパチャ返して
落ち着いて。大丈夫だから。
落ち着けるわけないだろ
絶対戻ってくるって。
だって僕は信じ
Examples like this are particularly unhinged, but it's the natural endpoint of these characters that try not only to commodify cute designs, but also our emotional reactions to them. These designs are quite literally engineered to emotionally manipulate us. Anime can be an incredibly powerful vehicle for striking narratives, and has personally impacted me greatly, but just like with all art, the wheel of capitalism attempts to reduce artistic expression and even our emotional connections into mere profitable commodities, all the while particularly targeting those already isolated or otherwise vulnerable. The rise in popularity of these subcultures has coincided with rising suicide rates and loneliness. Back to the painting, though. Look into her eyes. You can't help but stare into these vacant, hollow bubbles filled with sparkles. They literally draw your eyes towards them, masking the turmoil behind the characters. This evokes subcultures like menhera or jiraikei that hide inner turmoil through cuteness. Viewing these subcultures as a response to this hyper-commercialization becomes really interesting. This hollow yet cute aesthetic is being reclaimed as a way of genuine self-expression. These subcultures create spaces where people can express themselves through a shared visual language that resonates deeply with them. So despite the often overlooked cynical aspects, there is a reason such a dedicated and extensive culture has formed around them. This raises an interesting point, though. Can these subcultures lean into romanticizing or even fetishizing mental health and vulnerability, particularly in women? Do works like this portraying arguably infantilized women serve as a tool for control and reinforcing objectification? Mr. himself has even said some things that reinforce this very idea in interviews. There are many examples in anime of emotional vulnerability being played up in a way that is directed towards the male gaze, such as the yandere trope, where a woman becomes violently obsessed with a man, playing into misogynistic stereotypes of women as irrational and emotionally volatile. Women consistently being portrayed as emotionally unstable or in need of protection in art and fiction can cause real-world damage. So in spite of this, it seems almost contradictory that these potentially harmful subcultures are so popular with the very same groups they could potentially be harming. Perhaps it is a way of reclaiming agency by actively aestheticizing one's own suffering. It could be a way of attempting to control the narrative on one's own terms. Cloaking it in a more easily digestible form such as a moe anime girl also helps to shield against being dismissed or patronized. These subcultures can serve as a form of rebellion and offer genuine community through creativity and defiance. That being said, some women may certainly internalize certain harmful stereotypes and attempt to conform to them for the sake of approval. These subcultures can provide spaces where women feel safe to explore aspects of their identity and how it relates to things being expected of them, which is particularly appealing to those struggling with gender identity as well. But some women may be subtly pressured to lean into vulnerability or childlike innocence, whether they realize it or not, because that's what the male gaze tends to reward. You arguably see this often in virtual YouTubers, the majority of whom are women, and many of whom end up performing exaggerated cuteness that plays right into this dynamic. It's also possible in certain insular spaces that these subcultures could be used to promote harmful ideologies, such as real self-harm. Lastly, Japan has a habit of rewriting its imperial history and covering up its war crimes, and anime has been used to further this propaganda, whether consciously or not. Overall, Mr.'s painting has a lot to say, way more than I could ever hope to cover, about the complex and often contradictory phenomenon of kawaii aesthetics being used to mask pain and vulnerability. There is a complex interplay between empowerment and exploitation being explored in this painting that is indicative of much of otaku culture. And lastly, although this work is quite recent, it touches on the historical and ongoing commodification of cuteness that has become a dominant cultural force, while still celebrating these subcultures that have become so important to so many people, such as myself.